It was one of those afternoons when silence filled every corner of the house. The kind of silence you don't often notice until it stretches on for too long. My husband, Daniel, had left early for work that morning, promising he would be late because of meetings stacked one after the other. The kids were away at my sister's house for the weekend, and for the first time in months, I found myself completely alone in our big suburban home in Connecticut. At first, the quiet felt like a gift, time to breathe, to sip coffee without interruptions, to finally read that book I had left half-finished on the nightstand. I padded barefoot across the polished wooden floors, the echo of my own steps sounding unfamiliar in the empty house. The late summer sun spilled through the sheer curtains, painting golden lines across the living room rug. For a moment, I closed my eyes and just let myself sink into the stillness. There was no rush, no chaos, no constant calls for "Mom, can you help me with this?" Just me, the house, and the sound of a distant lawn mower from somewhere down the street. As the hours passed, though, the stillness began to change shape. The solitude that had felt comforting at first slowly grew heavier. I caught myself checking the clock too often, listening for footsteps that weren't there, even humming to fill the silence. By late afternoon, I poured myself a glass of iced tea and curled up on the sofa with my phone. Scrolling through social media didn't help. The endless stream of smiling couples and picture-perfect families only reminded me of the cracks in my own marriage, the quiet distance that had been growing between Daniel and me for months now. Marriage wasn't supposed to feel like this. At least, that's what I used to believe. But the truth was, Daniel and I had become strangers in our own home. He worked late more often than not, and when he was home, his mind was elsewhere: emails, deadlines, endless business calls. We spoke, but not really. We shared a bed, but rarely warmth. I had tried to tell myself it was just a phase, that all marriages go through dry spells, but deep down, I felt the loneliness gnawing at me more and more each day. That was when it happened. A sharp knock at the front door cut through the heavy quiet. I froze, the glass of iced tea halfway to my lips. Nobody ever came by unannounced, not here. Our neighborhood was friendly enough, but visits were always planned. My first thought was that it could be a delivery, though I hadn't ordered anything. Then the knock came again, firmer this time, almost impatient. Setting down my glass, I rose slowly, my heart beating a little faster than it should have. Maybe it was silly, but being alone in the house had made me unusually cautious. I padded to the door and peeked through the peephole. The sight on the other side startled me more than it should have. Standing there, framed against the late afternoon light, was a man I hadn't seen in years, Michael Reynolds. Michael had been Daniel's closest friend back in college, practically part of the family in those early years. He used to come over for dinner all the time when Daniel and I were first married, always full of stories and laughter that lit up the room. But then life had pulled us in different directions. He moved to Chicago for work, then later overseas. We had lost touch almost completely, aside from the occasional Christmas card or Facebook like. And now, here he was, standing on my doorstep as though no time had passed. I hesitated only a moment before opening the door. "Michael?" I asked, my voice betraying my surprise. His face broke into that familiar crooked smile I remembered so well. "Hey, Claire," he said warmly, his deep voice carrying both familiarity and something else I couldn't quite place. "I hope this isn't a bad time." For a heartbeat, I just stood there, taking him in. He looked older, of course, we all did, but in a way that made him seem sharper, more defined. His hair was darker at the roots but flecked with gray at the temples, his jawline stronger, his eyes still that same steady shade of hazel. He wore a fitted shirt with the sleeves rolled casually to his elbows, and I couldn't help but notice how different he looked from the young man I remembered. It's been forever," I managed to say, finally stepping aside. "Come in, of course." "Wow, I can't believe it's really you." Michael stepped into the house, his presence filling the quiet space with a sudden energy I hadn't realized I'd been missing. He glanced around the living room, smiling softly. "Place looks beautiful, Claire. You've really made it a home." "Thank you," I said, brushing a stray lock of hair from my face, suddenly aware of how casual I looked in my soft lounge clothes. "I wasn't expecting anyone, so forgive the mess." He laughed gently. "If this is a mess, I'd hate to see what you consider clean." The sound of his laugh, it stirred something I hadn't felt in a long time. Familiarity. Warmth. A reminder of who I used to be before life had grown so complicated. As we sat down in the living room, the silence that had felt so heavy earlier now seemed replaced by something else entirely, something alive, charged, almost electric. And for the first time all day, I didn't feel alone.